Whilst creating our opening, we had to consider codes and conventions of our genre to enable us to produce an effective psychological thriller opening. We had to decide whether we were going to develop and change the codes and conventions. We mainly developed the typical codes and conventions of the psychological thriller genre, but also changed them at times to create an effective, gripping opening. Our title creates suspense and enigma as the audience are not aware of what it is going to say, and also builds up to the fact that it's a psychological thriller because of how it fades in quickly, connoting panic. But alongside our title we included a scream of a female and a gunshot which run alongside it, which makes it more interesting to watch as the title is already appearing on the screen and engages the audience to keep on watching because they will want to know what is going to happen next and whose scream it is. Our title is similar to We Need to Talk About Kevin's title. When it fades into the teen boy carrying a dead female body, the audience is vaguely aware of what has happened due to the non-diegetic sound of a screaming gunshot, but they don't know the whole story of what has happened and why it's happened, creating enigma, and making them want to keep watching as they will want to know the whole backstory of why he killed her and if he is actually the one who killed her. We use voiceovers in our opening, and even though they are a little less conventional, as in most psychological thrillers we looked at, mainly consisted of speech between characters, allowing you to learn information. But in our opening, voiceovers were the best way to create enigma and suspense, as well as giving information about the protagonist and plot without giving too much away, just like American Psycho.
Street, on the 11th floor. My name is Patrick Bateman.
When I was younger, I found my brother dead on the floor, killed himself. My parents have been forcing me to see a therapist ever since.
Voiceovers also allow for understanding of what the audience have just seen. For instance, the field scene. We learned that he was having a dream about something that has happened in his life. It wasn't something his mind decided to create every time he closes his eyes.
I closed my eyes. No, it was real.
I'd say it cost at least.
The typical stock setting that we used was in the home or bedroom where the characters feel a sense of safety and familiarity and seclusion, where they can go to be alone or feel safe, anchored by the high key lighting connoting safety and familiarity. We had high key lighting to develop the typical codes and conventions and to also make the audience aware that his bedroom is somewhere he feels safe and he can be himself. Home and bedroom was also a typical stock setting that our target audience expected. Another stock setting we used was outdoors, as this is where the characters mostly spend their time and travel around. Fields are little less conventional, but it worked with creating enigma in our opening and setting up the plot like Donnie Darko. We also wanted to create something a little different and out of the ordinary, and didn't want to be a typical psychological thriller where you are introduced to characters and not much is happening, and not much information can be gathered about the plot until a bit later on. We wanted to create enigma and suspense straight away and set up the plot straight away. We chose these stock settings not only because they were conventional, but they were what our target audience expected. So by including these stock settings, we are appealing to our target audience while developing codes and conventions of a typical psychological thriller. We included a variety of stock characters in our opening: a mentally unstable teen, a special friend or romantic interest, and a therapist. These characters are typical in a psychological thriller, and by incorporating these characters we are establishing that it is a psychological thriller and not a love story or comedy. These stock characters are also what our target audience expected, so by incorporating them we are establishing that it is a psychological thriller and appealing to our target audience. The mentally unstable person is usually the protagonist of the film, and this is what we have done. We have created a mentally unstable teenage boy who is the protagonist of the film, creating an interesting, suspenseful, intriguing film and opening. Males are the typical protagonist in psychological thrillers, and by having our protagonist as a male conforms to the typical codes and conventions. We used a flashback to establish why our protagonist is seeking counselling and also gives more depth to our character, producing a connection between the audience and the protagonist. To keep our audience engaged and to feel the full effect of the film, they need some form of emotional connection to the protagonist and other characters. To do this, they need as much relevant character information as possible. For instance, when our audience find out why Christian killed his girlfriend, they will be able to feel some form of emotion for him. If it is sympathy and understanding or hatred towards him, the audience will, when they leave the cinema or start watching the DVD, will keep thinking of Christian because he would have made an impact on them for a few hours. The use of a special friend or love interest is a little less conventional, but the instability of Christian is aided by a special friend / romantic interest, as she is the main reason he killed her, because she was nasty and vicious towards him. She is what makes his mental illness get worse and more noticeable. She helps with the protagonist's development throughout the film, creating a more interesting film and characters. A therapist is used typically to help aid the storyline and help the protagonist with their difficulties. The therapist also helps to anchor that the character has a mental problem or illness and is the cause of the way they are and establishes who they are. Having music more than speech was a little less conventional, but it worked well as we wanted to build up a lot of enigma and questions, as the rest of the film would be conversational and a lot of questions would be answered. We wanted to create something that would engage our audience from the start. But in most psychological thrillers, especially ones that I looked at, built up enigma in different ways. We need to talk about Kevin is similar to ours in the way it builds up enigma. For instance, when Christian is about to find his brother dead on the floor, the audience do not know what they're going to see behind the door. Just like him, we need to talk about Kevin, the audience do not know what is going to be behind the curtains. The non-diegetic ticking noise in the background creates enigma as it is creating a build-up to something, just like our non-diegetic soundtrack in the flashback. This music contrasts with the music that was played in the flashback beforehand, which is spooky and unnerving, connoting that something bad is going to occur, unlike the therapist scene, which connotes that it is a safety net for Christian and he feels safe until he sees Alice. Editing is very important in our opening, as it establishes relationships, connections and events. Our editing is very slow, apart from at the beginning where Christian wakes up from his dream. This was a fast edit because we wanted to create a jump scare and also wanted to show the difference between dream and reality. The lighting in these scenes also helped to establish the dream from reality, as in the dream it is very low key and then in the bedroom it is high key. This is a huge contrast which enables our audience to know the difference between the two events they are watching. This is similar to The Sixth Sense, where we see the male character get shot in a low key room and there is a fade to black and then there is a fade into a very high key lighting outside. This helps to lower confusion and anchor that these two events are happening separately. In our opening scene, confusion can still be created as when he sits up in bed, we do not expect it, just like in The Sixth Sense, where we are shown the male who got shot is sitting on a bench. This creates confusion as the audience are unaware of what is going on. Alice is mostly edited and framed together with Christian whenever she appears in this opening scene, which anchors that there is a relationship between these two characters, and by having Alice have a bullet wound on her forehead, it helps to anchor that Christian has had something to do with what happened and something to do with why these events have happened. Somehow, together, they have created a tragedy and event that is bigger than both of them. Christian, on the other hand, although he is edited together with Alice a lot of the time, she is not always physically there, except for 2 times, at the beginning of the opening and at the end of the opening. Christian is most of the time edited alone and framed alone, with no one physically around him, connoting that he is a loner and likes isolation. This is typical in our genre, as the mentally unstable stock character likes to be alone and often does not have any friends because of their mental state. The slow edits and pace and rhythm also help to create enigma, especially in the field scene where everything is happening quite slowly and the titles are fading in and out. The audience have no idea what to expect. The titles fading in and out from black create enigma as we do not know what is going to change in the frame. Also, it was the best way to get our opening titles on, as having them in the frame alongside the action did not work and looked artificial and unrealistic. Enigma is created as there are many threads in our opening, because something will happen and will produce questions, but not long after an answer will be given. But that answer will produce another question, constantly keeping the audience engaged and wanting to carry on watching. When Christian wakes up, we feel a sense of disappointment that it was only a dream, and the voiceover which tells us that it wasn't a dream doesn't come for a while, keeping the audience engaged again. Even when we find out about the dream, we still don't understand why he killed her, or know why he killed her. Just like we need to talk about Kevin, where we learn little bits, but there are still many questions like why is there a crowd of people getting hit and covered in this red stuff? What is that red stuff? Blood? Food? We dress Christian in dark casual clothing, and this outfit is typical of teenage boys to wear. It connotes that he is trying his best to fit in and seeks normality despite his mental state and who he is. Like him, we need to talk about Kevin, who is wearing a school uniform, which is a massive stereotyped outfit for teenagers. The dark clothing we dressed our protagonist in was a little less conventional, as in other psychological thriller genres they wear light clothing, but we use mainly dark clothing to connote that there is something scary and unnatural with his character, and there is in fact something much deeper and darker to his character. It also connotes how he doesn't want to be seen for who he really is. Even though he wears the typically normal everyday outfits of a teen boy, he seeks for people not to notice him, as he is scared to get close to people just in case they find out his true colours. Alice is dressed in light and dark clothing. In the picture frame, she is wearing light clothing connoting innocence, and also stands out because they are quite bright, connoting that she is the type of character who wants attention and to be seen. Christian is also wearing light clothing and smiling in this picture, which connotes that it was an easy and happy time for him, and he found a friend that likes him for who he is. Christian has drawn crosses on Alice's eyes. This creates enigma as there are two contrasting elements. They are happy in the photo, and he still has the photo next to his bed. Why has he crossed out her eyes in hatred? If he hates her so much, why has he kept the photo? It also makes the audience question what has she done wrong. Alice is wearing a dark black dress when she is dead, connoting that she is no longer innocent and pure, and her death was not a natural one, which can also be anchored by the bullet wound, because being shot in the head is not a natural death or occurrence. Young Christian in the flashback is wearing light clothing connoting innocence, as he is only young and has not done any harm as of yet. Long shots are typically used in psychological thrillers to establish a setting, and close-ups are often used to establish a relationship, voiceover, and emotions on a character's face. We use many long shots in our opening to establish settings. We use the long shot at the start of our opening to establish a setting and create enigma, as the audience will wonder why there is a boy carrying a dead female body through a field, but the medium shot with the zoom in not long after helps to anchor that it is a teenage boy and the girl is in fact dead. It also shows how she died in a vague way, shown by the bullet wound. We used a series of close-ups and medium shots on Christian when there was a voiceover occurring to anchor that it is Christian who is speaking. This develops typical closing conventions, as it also is done in American Psycho. The close-ups also help to show emotions on the characters' faces. Christian looks sad and thoughtful here. Christian has a straight face here to connote that he is walking, but also has a hint of thoughtfulness as he is walking, as it leads to a flashback. Alice has a very smug look on her face as she says "miss me," connoting that she isn't as innocent as she seems in all of this. A handheld camera movement is used when Christian is walking through with the therapist, which gives the impression that we are walking alongside of him and things are quite slow building up to something. When Alice comes out from behind the door, it can come as a surprise to the audience as they think that she is dead or missing, and they start to wonder why she is there and why Christian is the only one who can see her. But by seeing the bullet wound, they will think that all is not as it seems. A handheld camera movement is also used in the flashback to connote uneasiness and create tension, and make it feel like we are walking alongside the younger Christian. An arc is used in the bedroom scene where Christian is having a voiceover. This gives a feeling that he is thinking, and it is quite shaky to give a sense of puzzlement and how these events have shaken him up.